Hello and welcome, fellow bookworms and film fans. Welcome to this week's episode of The Contented Narrative, where we're looking at Roald Dahl's classic Matilda. Now, it was written, of course, by Roald Dahl, and it was published in 1988. Now, it was then adapted into a film in 1996, and I'll be looking at four things as I always do. I'll be looking at the plot, I'll be looking at how well the movie is, how well the book is, and overall, how well did the film take from the book. So first of all, we're going to start with the plot. And obviously, spoilers, I will be discussing the book and the film in its entirety. So with both, you get introduced to Matilda, who is ignored by her parents. She's very different to her family. Her family love TV dinners and watching TV and just basically doing nothing with their lives. She loves to read and she absorbs knowledge. Now, in the film, you get a bit of background on what the parents do straight away, but the book, you don't get any of that information until a little bit later on. So the film pretty much straight away is like a narrator telling you, this is what the mom does, this is what the dad does, this is what Matilda's life is, basically. So in both, she does show an aptitude for learning, and she asks for a book. Now, her father, Mr. Wormwood, says no. Pretty understandable. He cannot abide anyone that reads. So he's just like, no, not a chance you're reading this book. So then she waits until they all leave her alone for the day, as they normally do. Child neglect, yay. And she looks up the address for the library and goes off to the public library. Now, when she goes to the public library, she then ends up devouring like every child's book, and then she's looking for more things to read. So because she goes to the library every day, she becomes pretty much best friends with the librarian, which happens in both. So the librarian pretty much becomes her friend, helps her choose the books, let her know that with a library card you can take books home, you can, basically absorb all of this, and she tries to help pick out the books that would probably be best for Matilda. Matilda reads everything, by the way, like everything. Books that we probably still wouldn't touch in our adult years. So in the book, we find out about Mr. Wormwood's dodgy car dealership as he's at home and telling his son about it. In the film, he does take the kids to work to show them what it is that he does. Now, in the book, due to being ridiculed by her parents, she decides to get her own back on them. But in the film, it's because Mr. Wormwood's like, I'm big, you're small, I'm right, you're wrong, and there's nothing you can do about it. And also, I think he says something about when people are bad, people deserve to be punished. So in her head, it's people, not children. I do find, though, in the book, she's a lot more mischievous, and she's a lot more of a prankster than she is in the film. In the film, it's reactionary. In the book, she sort of goes out of her way to do it. So in the film, she puts hair dye in her dad's shampoo. And then when she's taken to the car dealership, she puts super glue in his hat. Now, this then results in Mr. Wormwood trying to get his hat off at a restaurant, being completely embarrassed, unable to remove it. Then it cuts to them being at home and they're cutting off the hat. She's like, I don't understand, Harry. How did you glue your hat to your head? And he's just like, the fibres are fused to my head. Which, he doesn't think twice that it could be his little girl. In the book, however, she puts glue into his hat before he goes to work. So he spends the whole day with a hat glued to his head. When he does then try to get the hat off at home, and she doesn't do the hair dye trick until much later in the book. So after the hat incident, in the book, Mr. Wormwood finally gets the hat cut off, and then he puts his foot down about eating dinner in front of the TV, and he notices Matilda is reading and destroys the book, which then forces her to watch TV, which she blows up in the film. She completely blows it up. So that's in the film, sorry. She, after he gets it cut off, they watch TV and then she blows it up in front of them. In the book, however, he ends up wearing the hat for a night, and indeed into bed as well. Finally gets it removed, ends up in a foul mood and destroys her book. To which she then wants to get revenge, and so she then goes to a friend. So in the book, she's got a friend. In the film, she doesn't really have anyone until she goes away to school. So in the book, she borrows a parrot from her friend to spook her parents, because she pushes the parrot up into the I was going to say log flume there. That's not even close to being right. Into where into the fireplace. There we go. I was thinking of the Flume Network from Harry Potter. So she pushes the parrot up, and they believe that the house is haunted. So this is how she punishes her dad and her whole family. So she's a lot more a lot more of an evil little witch at times, if you think. So in both, Mr. Wormwood rattles off a list of numbers at one point and wants to show his profit to his son on how much he's made on these certain cars. Now, in both, Matilda gets it straight away, adds it all up in her head, gets it straight away, and he thinks she's cheating, to which she isn't, and that's sort of the first instinct we've got of how clever she really is. So now in the book as well, he calls her a cheat and everything, and that's when she then dyes his hair blonde, which, as I said, in the film has already happened. So in the book, she attends school just normally because her parents put her in, but they put her in late. In the film, Matilda is pushing her parents to send her to school because they're just like, oh, you're 4. And she's like, I'm 6.5. I was 6 in August. I've seen this film loads of times. I could probably quote it within a T. So in the film, her dad sells a car to Miss Trunchbull, and she mentions the school. So he goes, oh, right, well, I'll send her there. And she gets enrolled. Now, in the book, she comes into the school, and although it's a dreary place and Miss Honey is lovely, there isn't much else going on at that point. You get inklings of what goes on sort of later on in the book, but straight away it's sort of like just a nice little bit of a dreary place, but other than that, it's not too bad. Whereas in the film, when she goes in on her first day, she sees the headmistress, Miss Trunchbull, hammer throw a girl over the railings by her pigtails. And that's her first sort of instant of public school. So she's absolutely terrified and goes, what's my teacher like? And then she meets Miss Honey, who's absolutely, of course, a lovely human being. Now in both, however, she does impress Miss Honey on the first day because she's able to multiply big numbers in her head. And she shows an aptitude that Miss Honey has never seen in her life. So Miss Honey then goes off to Miss Trunchbull and tries to get her to move Matilda up a grade, or several grades, due to her genius. However, Miss Trunchbull doesn't agree and thinks that Matilda is the spawn of the devil and thinks that Miss Honey is trying to push her off on someone else. So in both, Miss Honey goes, right, okay, well, I'm going to try and tutor her as best I can, despite the fact that I'm teaching basically 6-year-olds. So she gets material so she can continue to learn things at home and goes to the home address of the Wormwoods to talk about how gifted Matilda is, which goes just about as well in both. She barges it, well, she knocks on the door, she wants to talk to them, she gets ridiculed by Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood, she leaves the book and then sees Matilda the next day. The Wormwoods are not very forward thinking, as it were. So in both, Matilda does make a friend with a girl in her class called Lavender. Now in the film, a blonde girl scares them with information about the Chokey and Miss Trunchbull sort of at the very first day that Matilda's there. In the book, however, as I said, they find this out after some time, and that's when Amanda gets thrown by her pigtails as well. It's quite later on in the book, rather than day 1 for Matilda. However, in both, you do get Bruce Bogtrotter. Now, I can't watch this scene in the film. It makes me feel physically sick, and I can't eat chocolate cake for weeks afterwards. So he steals a slice of Miss Trunchbull's, special cake that Cook makes for her. And so she brings him on stage, brings out this whole massive cake and goes, eat it all. And he does. He really does. It's grim. So that happens there. Now in the book, Lavender gets a newt with the purpose of putting it in Miss Trunchbull's water jug. However, in the film, it sort of happens by accident. She's out with her friends, they find a newt, they then, when Miss Trunchbull pulls up, her car's playing up, so she throws Matilda in the Chokey, goes into Miss Honey's class. Lavender then goes, oh, let's put the newt in the glass, and it kind of comes about by that. Whereas in the book, it's almost, this is what she's thinking the minute she finds the newt. So that's slightly different. I mean, it's along the same lines, but slightly different as to why she does it. Now, the classroom scene is slightly different. Again, in the book, it's a different child that talks about the word difficulty. As I'm sure we're all aware, we've probably all learnt how to spell difficulty because of Matilda. Mrs. D, Mrs. I, Mrs. F, F, I, Mrs. C, Mrs. U, Mrs. L, T, Y. Miss Trunchbull's famous response, why are all these women married? Fantastic. Honestly, I learnt big words. So it's a different child in the book than it is in the film. In the film, it's Amanda Thrupp, the pigtail girl from the beginning. But then Miss Trunchbull also grabs a child by his hair for getting a multiplication question wrong in the book. And she also sort of like gets one of them to go stand in a corner on one leg because he gets something wrong. She's a lot more vicious to the children in the book, sort of just in little small amounts, whereas in the film she's got the chokey, she's got the hammer throw and everything like that, but you don't really see her beating up on the children as much, which I think is a good thing. So in the book, Matilda now discovers that she's got powers when she pushes the glass with the newt in onto Miss Trunchbull. However, at this point in the film, she's known about her powers for a while, and she's almost got them honed, as it were. So, you know, she figures out that she's got some sort of power. She starts doing things with her mind to figure out what she can do and not do. But in both, she does tell Miss Honey about her power. Now, in the book, she's able to show Miss Honey pretty much straight away, but in the film, she doesn't quite able to do that. It does take her a little bit longer to hone that power, as it were, to show Miss Honey. But in both, Matilda does end up going home with Miss Honey to her little house. Now, in the film, it's a beautiful little cottage. It's got lovely little inside and everything. In the book, it's a lot bleaker, and it's described as sort of having like no bath, no shower, like no heating, literally just like one little square. Like she can't afford anything, she can't even afford food, and it's a lot darker than it is in the film, basically. But then, because of this, and because obviously, you know, Matilda then starts talking to Miss Honey, we then find out that Miss Trunchbull is Miss Honey's aunt. Now, in the film, it's because Miss Honey is telling a story about, you know, this big house and everything, and then Matilda puts two and two together. In the book, she's asking questions of Miss Honey, and Miss Honey ends up spilling all and being like, "Why am I talking to you? You're, you know, 6 years old, but I'm talking to you like an adult." So you do get that. Now, in the film, they do a little exploring around the house and they almost get caught by Miss Trunchbull, which is a tense scene. So decide to run away and do nothing further. And then Matilda then starts devising a plan on how she can get the stuff back for Miss Honey, and starts devising a plan in her head. In the book, however, Matilda starts devising a plan in her head straight away. They don't go and explore the house. They don't have that scene at all. So in the film, Matilda goes back to the house to try and scare Miss Trunchbull off and almost succeeds. However, as Miss Trunchbull is running away, she sees Matilda's hair ribbon on the car and realizes what's happened and is now going to punish her something rotten the next day. Whereas in the book, as I said, Matilda then starts practicing her powers for her plan. So she starts really concentrating on like a lipstick, trying to lift it up and write across a mirror, because she has a feeling as what she's going to do. So in the film, Miss Trunchbull comes storming in to inflict hell on Matilda, as she knows that is who was at her house. By this point as well, Miss Honey has now seen Matilda's powers in action. However, in the book, it's just an ordinary day that Miss Trunchbull decides to teach the class. So in both, Matilda uses her powers to scare Miss Trunchbull into giving Miss Honey back everything by finding out what the nickname was the dad had for Miss Honey, and what the nickname the dad had for Miss Trunchbull, and what Miss Trunchbull called Miss Honey's dad, and then uses the chalkboard and everything to write the message. So she does that in both. However, in the book, Miss Trunchbull passes out and is carried to sickbay. In the film, she's sort of running away and gets pelted by food by all the students until she literally runs out, covered in food and everything like that, and, you know, she's never seen again. In both, Miss Honey then gets the house, and Matilda then becomes a frequent visitor. However, in the book, the deputy head teacher takes over the school, which is the logical thing to do. In the film, Miss Honey seems to then run the school, as it were. So in the book, the deputy head teacher has taken over, and Matilda then loses her powers at that point. She doesn't have them anymore. As I said, in the film, Miss Honey takes over and Matilda still uses her powers right up until the end. In both, the Wormwoods are now running away as authorities are onto them because of the dodgy car dealership. So they're trying to get Matilda to come with them. However, she convinces them to let her stay with Miss Honey and to get adopted by Miss Honey, because obviously she's more appreciated there than she is in the book by the Wormwoods. Now in the book, it's sort of straight away, she goes, yep, I'm staying with Miss Honey, that's absolutely fine. In the film, we get a little bit of a thing with the mum and the dad, and they're finally realising that the best thing they can do for their daughter is to let her go somewhere else with someone else. And I think that's a really sweet moment, and I'm kind of glad that they added that into the film. So that's sort of how it ends. So it ends with Matilda being adopted by Miss Honey and happiness ensues. As I said, in the film, she's still got her powers. In the book, they disappear. And that's it, and everybody gets what they deserve and what they want. Now, the film did add a subplot with the FBI, which the FBI is sort of staking out the Wormwood's house. They sort of like become friends with Mrs. Wormwood so that they can kind of find out, you know, what's going on and everything. And then he's racing the FBI to get to the airport. And they did add that subplot. And in the book, it doesn't show up until the end that they're in any kind of trouble with the authorities. It also did have quite a few similar things, but it's kind of switched the order around, like the hair dye and the glue, and they're taking the kids to work day and everything like that. Now, I do believe the film did take the essential parts of the book and just added a few bits more to make it a little bit more theatrical as it was. Because obviously a Roald Dahl book is quite a small book. I managed to get it read in 3 hours, which is nothing really. But because they did change the order of things around and they did add a couple of things and miss out a couple of things, I will give the overall plot a 6 out of 10. Now the film ages so well. It is a fantastic film. I love it today as I did the very first time I saw it. I can quote this off by heart. I can take a picture, send it to Nikki. Nikki knows exactly what film I'm watching. And honestly, they did change bits of the film of the book into the film, but I adored what the film did. I adored all the little subplots, the context, the FBI, you know, Matilda honing her skills and everything, and her going off to the library, and it was just such a beautiful film. And honestly, I can watch this every day of the week. I honestly can, and I would recommend this to completely everybody. I would recommend this to people with kids, without kids, looking to kill a couple of hours on an afternoon. I would give it a 9 out of 10 for the film. Now the book. The book is a lovely little children's book. Roald Dahl does do lovely little children's book. 9 times out of 10 though, in a Roald Dahl book, they seem to be punishing some sort of adult. So just bear that in mind when you're reading it to your kids. I love how it has a little bit of magic in it, and it has a strong and smart girl, and it has heroics from the other characters. I believe that you could read this book to your children and they would absolutely adore it. I feel like, you know, it's something that you can do together with your children, and especially in these times as well. Reading with your kids and reading it chapter by chapter, it's a great way to get them to learn, basically. Maybe not how to punish parents though. I just think it's a really nice story and you can never go wrong with Dahl, and so I would definitely recommend this as an 8 out of 10. It's got magic, it's got characters, it's got, you know, a really nice ending, and it's just a perfect little book really. So overall, the biggest thing for me was the book is set in England, and for some unknown reason they set it in America. And you know from The Girl on the Train how I dislike when they take things that are set in a specific place and move it to a completely different country for no apparent reason. Mr. and Mrs. Wormwood also seem the other way round in the book. So in the book, Mrs. Wormwood is described as being slightly larger and Mr. Wormwood sort of thinner. And yet in the film it's sort of like twisted round. So you've got a slightly larger Mr. Wormwood and a thinner Mrs. Wormwood. I know that's only a little thing, but it's a little thing for me. And the bits that they added in with the visits to the house and the FBI and everything, I think they wanted to make it more theatrical, which meant changing a lot more of the book than they necessarily would. Therefore, I think the overall adaptation gets a 5 out of 10 for me. Now, this is my own opinion, of course. If you do disagree with anything, if there is anything that you'd like to add, please do leave it below in the comments. Don't forget to click subscribe so you're alerted whenever a new video comes out. And join me next week for my contented narrative around The Wizard of Oz. But until then, remember to always keep it contento.